Hello everyone, my name is Honza, and welcome back to yet another episode of Journey Through Norse Mythology. Today we are going to talk about Ragnarok, more precisely of how Odin learned of the prophecy of the doom of the gods. Just a little mention here, do not mistake the doom of the gods, that is Ragnarok, with the twilight of the gods, that is Ragnarokr. Even though they both refer to the same event, that is the end of the world, you can often see the mistake of attaching the twilight of the gods to Ragnarok, while both names have different meaning. Now, before we start, it is important to clarify something. Norse myths that survive to this day may sometimes seem a little bit out of order. Sometimes a myth may refer to an event that could not have yet feasibly happened, or to characters that couldn't possibly have been born at that point. However, we have to remember that the Norse myths, as we have compiled them today, are not only but a fragment of all the myths that have been told, but, more importantly, the poems they are told in were mostly composed at different points in history, and sometimes even in different places in the world. While some may have been composed in 9th century Scandinavia, others may have been composed in 12th century Iceland. The birthplace and birth time of some of these myths can be several centuries apart, and so it is no wonder that these myths don't sometimes fit perfectly together. These myths weren't composed with a linear and a specific narrative in mind. Remember, they were first compiled together by Christians, not pagans. When they were composed in the form of poems, they were most likely supposed to be told one at a time, with the purpose to amuse, impress, or enlighten. I point this out just so you wouldn't get confused, not only during this video, but also in the future. Norse myths aren't built for coherent narrative, and sometimes you don't just need to fill in the gaps, but also explain the hills and mountains of impossibility that get in the way. With this in mind, the prophecy of Ragnarok covers events that once were, are happening right now, and that are still going to happen, and so I hope I helped you ease into it. In Norse mythology, the events that are yet to happen in the future, mostly the events regarding Ragnarok, are well known to the wise, either as an inherent consequence of their wisdom, or because, like Odin, they found out from someone else. And in Odin's case, that someone would be a dead seeress or a volva, which is a word synonymous with soothsayers and female shamans in Norse mythology and during the Viking Age. This video will be my interpretation of one of the most important poems from the Poetic Edda, that being Völuspá. In this poem, Odin awakens a dead seeress from her deathly slumber and asks her for information about the end of the world. The Volva tells Odin many things regarding a vast range of topics of Norse mythology, from the beginning of its universe to its eventual end, and even though a great part of this poem focuses on Ragnarok, there are many mentions of other Norse myths and lore. Even though many of these mentions are brief and vague, there is no doubt they gave us an insight to many events in Norse mythology we would otherwise know only a little about, or perhaps even nothing at all. I think it is quite clear just what a goldmine of information about Norse mythology this poem really is. The entirety of this poem is told in a monologue from the seeress, as she recites the ancient truths and, of course, the prophecy of what is to come. I, as always, make a few little additions to further develop and expand on this myth, just so it has a bit more color to it. Since a great part of today's video will be quotations from Volva's monologue, I will not announce out loud that I am about to be citing a particular source. This is purely to ensure the smoothness of the dialogue and transitions. The quotations will of course be listed on the screen as always. Also, to keep from breaking the story narrative, I will make a separate video where I will examine and explain the Völuspá poem and what the Volva in it talks about. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started. After Odin received what could only be described as a vague premonition of what was to come, he sought high and low for a clear answer to his vision. He had spent a long time wandering throughout the 9 realms, seeking sages and seers who might tell him what he was looking for. Alas, none of the living was able to give him the answers he desired, and so after a long time of travelling through distant realms and many encounters with creatures, beings and characters of which even the myths stay silent, Odin finally arrived to his sought destination. It was a burial ground, deep within the boundaries of Jotunheim, big enough to hold the bodies of 100 men, yet the whole site was a place of final rest to but one person. A Volva, perhaps the greatest one that ever lived, so ancient even her name was forgotten. The stories Odin heard told she could see further into the future than any other seeress or soothsayer. She was venerated for her abilities during her day, back in the times when the cosmos was young. Yet now she was long dead, but Odin needed answers. He carved ancient runes upon his staff, and spoke strange incantations in a tongue unknown to mortals and even other gods. Then he knocked 3 times against Volva's tomb with his staff, and the runes carved upon it started to glow with bright light. The ground rumbled, and strange energies flowed through it as Odin cast the 12th spell he learned hanging from Yggdrasil, the spell to awaken the dead. The stone tablet guarding the entrance to Volva's tomb slid away, and a slender figure appeared, rising as a sleeper from their bed. Even though the seeress has been dead for half the lifetime of the universe, the herbs and veils that she had been emballed in had kept her appearance relatively preserved. Volva's eyes opened, glowing with a dim blue light. The seeress looked around as if slightly confused before she saw Odin standing out in the doorway to her tomb. Who wakes me from my slumber? Who dares to break the rest of the dead? Who are you, and what do you want? I'm Odin, son of Bor. I seek your wisdom and power of foresight. The Volva muttered under her breath. You must know that wisdom doesn't come cheap, she warned and slowly stood up. Odin threw a hefty sack to her feet, which spilled its contents of gold and jewels to the stone floor. There's more than enough in there for you to live as a queen in the afterlife. You but need to answer my questions. The Volva bent over, pressing one of her hands against her lower back with a grimace of pain on her face, before she picked up one of the diamond-crowned rings. She mumbled again as she examined it. Very well then, she nodded in agreement and slipped the ring on her almost skeletal thin finger. What prophecy you ask of me? You want to know what child your wife will bear? Or if you will be remembered after you die? Or perhaps you would like to know when you die? I answer a lot of those. No prophecy yet, seeress, Odin declared. I've met too many charlatans pretending to possess the gift of foresight. I will test your mettle before you tell me of the future. If you truly are a Volva, tell me of the ancient days. Tell me of the time no mortal today can live to recall, and I will believe you. As you wish, said the seeress and closed her eyes. When she threw her head back and opened them again, they were shining with a deep emerald light, and the seeress began. You summoned me, Odin, to tell what I recall of the oldest deeds of gods and men. I remember the giants, born so long ago. In those ancient days they raised me. I remember 9 worlds, 9 giantesses, and the seed from which Yggdrasil sprang. It was the very beginning, it was Ymir's time. There was no sand, no sea, no cooling waves, no earth, no sky, no grass, just Ginnungagap. But Odin and his brothers created the earth. It was they who made Midgard. 3 gods, powerful and passionate, left Asgard for Midgard. They found Esk and Embla, weak, faithless in that land. They had no breath, no soul, no hair, no voice. They looked inhuman. Odin gave them breath, Vili gave them souls, they gave them hair and human faces. Thus rose the humankind, the Volva proclaimed. Odin was about to stop her, but she continued. I remember the first murder ever in the world, when Gullveig was pierced with spears and burned in Odin's hall. They burned her 3 times, she was reborn 3 times, often killed, not a few times, still she would live again. They named her Heather when she came into their homes, a sorceress who foresaw good things. She knew magic, she knew witchcraft, she practiced witchcraft. She was a pride of an evil family. The Vanir gods, they would not stand for such insult to their house. They marched to Asgard and met with the Aesir on the field. Odin let a spear fly and shot it into the fray. That was the first war ever in the world. The outer wall of Asgard was broken. The Vanir knew war magic. They trampled the valleys. A war raged across the cosmos, costly for both sides, too terrible for either side to triumph. Then saw the gods their assembly seats, the holy ones and council held, whether the gods should tribute give, or to all alike should worship belong. "Very well, witch," Odin said, and approached the still talking seeress. But as he came closer, the seeress grabbed both his hands, and her burning emerald eyes matched his one. "Odin, I knew where you hid your eye, in the shining waters of the well of Mimir. But Mimir can drink every morning from those waters where your own eye drowns. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father?"
"All right," Odin pulled his hands from the seeress's stone-cold grip. "I believe your power now."
"You do well too, Rune Master," the seeress cackled. "Now tell me, what prophecy do you ask of me?" Odin pondered about the question for a moment.
"A drink from the well of wisdom granted me a glimpse into the future. I saw visions of fire and death, but they were too brief and unclear for me to understand. I wish to know what fate awaits me and the gods."
Very well, the seeress hummed and leaned her head back. When she opened her eyes, the familiar emerald glow was back. "Odin opened my eyes to rings and necklaces. In exchange he got wisdom and prophecy. I saw more and more, looking out over all the worlds. I know much wisdom. I see deep in the future, all the way to Ragnarok, a dark day for the gods. I saw Balder, the bloodied victim, Odin's son, resigned to his fate, bleeding in the sand. I saw a prison of his killer as well, and in it I saw a prisoner, lying in a certain wood, the liar himself, none other than Loki, the very ground of Midgard chased with his torment. That is the revenge of the gods for Balder's murder. After Balder's death, brothers will fight one another and kill one another. Cousins will break peace with one another. The world will be a hard place to live in. When Fimble winter comes, a winter 3 years long with no spring, summer or autumn in between, this winter shall herald the downfall of mankind. It will be an age of adultery, an age of the axe, an age of the sword, an age of storms, an age of wolves. Shields will be cloven before the world sinks into the sea. There will be no man left who is true to another. In hell, dead men are filled with life. The home of the gods turns red with gore. The sun shines black throughout the summers. The weather is never cheerful. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? The Volva turned her still glowing eyes to Odin in question. While the god was disturbed by her prophecy, he didn't let it show.
"Continue."
The Volva nodded her head and turned her gaze to the skies once more. "Fenrir howls terribly before the doors to hell. The wolf will break its bonds and run. Hrim advances from the east with a shield before him, and the Midgard serpent is in a monstrous rage. It spits venom and poisons both the sea and air, and as it beats the waves, it floods shores and land. With this high water, Naglfar, the giant's ship, is released. That ship sails from the east, bearing giants over the sea, and Loki is its captain. The giants are coming together with Fenrir, and Loki too is with them on that voyage. The enemies of the gods assemble in the home of the giants. What news of the gods? What news of the elves? All Jotunheim is roaring. The Aesir are in council, and the dwarfs, creatures of the mountains, tremble by the doors of stone. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father?"
"Continue,"
Odin ordered, albeit with a slight hesitation. "Then Surt comes from the south with a bright light in his hand. Yes, the sun shines upon the sword in his grasp. That sword that he started forging at the beginning of time itself. The god killer, the earth splitter, flame bearer, the greatest sword in creation, burning with the power of 1,000 suns. That blade will Surt bring out of Muspelheim as he leads his sons into battle." The old tree sighs when the giant shakes it. Yggdrasil still stands, but it trembles, and with it the cosmos. The giants are at play, and the god's fate is kindled at a blast of Giala horn. Heimdall blows that horn hard, holds it high aloft, to warn the gods that the enemies of Asgard had come. Before the Einherjar are mustered, however, Odin speaks with Mimir's head, seeking advice for the final battle. But alas, this would be the only time Mimir would have no counsel to offer. And so the armies of the gods and giants clash upon the plain of Vigrid, a field 100 miles long and wide. And there, the final battle will take place, with fighting stretching as far as the eye can see in all directions. The bravely fallen fight the wicked dead, and the gracious gods fight the vile giants and the monsters that accompany them. Then comes the second sorrow of Frigg, when Odin goes to fight the wolf, and Frey goes to fight the giant's third. Then Odin, Frigg's husband, will fall to Fenrir, and when he's devoured, then comes the great son of Odin, Vidar, to fight, to avenge his father on the wolf. He shoves his sword into the mouth of Fenrir, all the way to the heart, and thus Odin is avenged. Then Thor comes, Earth's son, Odin's son, to fight the Midgard serpent. The protector of Midgard will kill the serpent in his rage, but all humankind will die out of the world when Thor falls after only 9 steps, struck down by the venom of the honorless serpent. Then Frey encounters Surt, and heavy blows are exchanged before Frey falls to the fire giant. Even Garm, the watchdog of the gates of hell, gets loose and wreaks havoc upon the battlefield. He contends with Tyr, and they kill each other in a mad fight. Then the Warden of the Gods and the Great Deceiver meet for the last time. Loke fights with Heimdall, and they kill each other after a long and brutal duel. The Hall of Cosmos cries as the gods are dying. The sun turns black, the earth sinks into the sea, the bright stars fall out of the sky, flames scorch the leaves of Yggdrasil, a great bonfire reaches to the highest clouds. A deafening silence will ring as the universe falls. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father?
Odin tried to form an answer. The revelation of the end of days, of his own death, and the demise of what would be his children, filled him with a dread and sour feeling of hopelessness he had never felt up to that point. Yet his desire to know overwhelmed even his deepest fears. What happens then? What happens after?
The Volva hummed. Few see all the way to Ragnarok, and few are still beyond that. Few, but some. I see the earth rise a second time from out of the sea, green once more. Waterfalls flow and the eagles fly overhead, hunting for fish among the mountain peaks. The remaining Aesir meet on Ithavoll and regard the bones of the Midgard serpent. And there they recall the great events of Ragnarok and Odin's old wisdom. Fields will bear harvest without labor, all sickness will disappear, Balder will come back, Hoth and Balder will live in Odin's hall, as well as the other gods. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? This time, Volva continued straight away, without even letting Odin answer. Then Heinir will speak forth its prophecies, and the 2 sons of Odin, the 2 brothers, will inhabit the heavens. Have you learned enough yet, All-Father? I see a hall standing there, more beautiful than sunlight, thatched with gold at Gimle. There bold men will dwell and enjoy cheer throughout their lives. The Volva stopped for a moment, letting the image sink in. Then the dark dragon will come flying, down from the dark mountains, the glistening serpent, Nidhogg will bear corpses in his wings as he flies over that valley, the eater of roots, a relic of a bygone age, a terror from a dead world. Nidhogg will claw its way out of the ruins of Yggdrasil, and the gods will rise to fight once more, and a new Ragnarok will dawn that day, and after it's done, a new world shall rise, doomed to the same fate. Thus it shall be for all of eternity. Then the Volva turned her glowing eyes towards Odin, who stood frozen in the spot by fear. I spoke to you of the times of old. I revealed to you the prophecies of days to come. I trust you learned enough, All-Father. Now I must retire, but hear my words, Odin. This fate awaits ye all. and with a mad cackling, the Volva sank back into her tomb, with the stone tablet falling in behind her, and Odin wasted no time and ran out of that place, the dulled mad laughter of the seeress accompanying him for quite some time before he got far enough away. Great fear gripped the god's heart at the thought of what he just heard. Never before had Odin been frightened as much. It took a while for him to collect himself and think clearly about what he witnessed. The terrible doom of the gods, elves, dwarfs and men was coming, but he would not let it destroy them. When Ragnarok would come, he would be prepared, and with a plan hatching in his mind, he set back to Asgard to claim back his throne. And this would be all for today, and I bid you all farewell, until next time.